What were conditions like for the British Tommy in World War One?
So if we think about conditions for the British Tommy in the First World War, the initial observation is that no one is expecting to be in trenches, and if they are, for no period of time at all. So we associate the First World War with trenches, but that was never the intention. And the idea, of course, is to dig in to protect the gains you've made, and also to protect the troops from the weather. And it just happens that we stay in the trenches for 3.5 years because we can't get out of them because of advances in military technology. So, having said that, the easiest way to convey the trenches to a contemporary audience is think Glastonbury, but without the waterproofing, without the Wellington boots, or anything like that. So all soldiers have is their ordinary woolen uniforms, which don't really protect them from the elements. Now, we have a problem when we're talking about trenches in the First World War, because the perception is that people go into the trenches and spend months on end in them. The reality is, certainly for the British soldiers, you will go in for no more than a week or 10 days max and be rotated through. So your time of misery, of trench foot, of freezing, of all the rest of it is never really longer than about 7 to 10 days. It's different for the Germans and the French. They tend to stay for months on end in the same trenches with all the sort of deterioration in their morale and their health and so on.
How and why did trench warfare develop?
Trench warfare is very much an accident. We can reach back to the American Civil War, we can reach back to 17th century siege warfare. Soldiers have always dug trenches to protect them from enemy fire and a bit from the elements. So this is nothing new. The development of trenches in the First World War is firstly their complexity. It isn't one line of trenches, it's several, they're interconnected. They're also dug in zigzag fashion to minimise the blast. And something else we forget is that most soldiers live underground for the duration of their time in the trenches. There's endless dugouts, and that's not where you just go during a bombardment. You live there, you sleep there, all the rest of it. But having said that sort of trenches are a very ancient way of warfare, it's the fact that you blend onto them modern technology. So barbed wire, machine gun positions. When gas arrives, you've got to protect soldiers from gas, because gas is usually heavier than air, will sink straight into the trenches. Tanks are developed specifically to cross trenches. So the reason why First World War tanks are very long is so that they can get over the trenches. So trenches actually trigger all sorts of other technological developments as well.
In what ways did the Somme go wrong?
The Somme is the natural development of the Brits and the French understanding that to defeat the Germans, they've got to attack together, use the combined resources of both nations, and they'll launch a major attack in the Somme area, because that's where the French and the British armies' borders overlap. And so it's very much a sort of unified effort. Neither army is strong enough or has the resources to break through the German lines, but together they will. And something happens that ruins that plan. Very, very good idea, masses of troops and artillery concentrated, punch your way through the German lines and roll them up. What happens is the Germans strike at Verdun first in February 1916. And the French are bleeding so much manpower that they can't support the attack on the Somme with any great strength, which was their original intention. And also, we need to launch the Somme early to take the pressure off the French. So the Somme is launched earlier than first planned, and without the huge majority of Frenchmen that we were expecting.
Looking back from a distance of 100 years, how significant was this battle? Was it Haig's great folly?
There's nothing wrong with the Somme plan as it stands, and it's a perfectly logical deployment of the military technology of the day. A week-long bombardment of thousands of guns, literally drenching the enemy lines with high explosive. The problem with the Somme comes in three forms. First, communication. So when something goes wrong at the front and your men are held up on the barbed wire, you don't have wireless equipment to radio back and say, stop, it's all going horribly wrong. Communications in those days are so primitive, you can't get that message back to higher commanders quick enough. So that's the first thing that happens. The second is the duration of the campaign. Initially, it's expected to launch the attack in good weather, and within a few days, the German reserves, their trenches will be taken, and the battle will be essentially over. Because the Germans resist for longer, and it takes longer to punch our way through the various German trench lines, the campaign starts getting drawn out. And that means we run out of reserves, we start to run out of shells, the weather starts to change, and although we're slowly grinding the Germans down, it's not the quick victory that everyone expects. And the third point is that Douglas Haig continues with the battle, because if you are the commander-in-chief of your armies, when do you suddenly stop and pull stumps and say, enough? If you're advised by your intelligence chief that one more push and the Germans will win, do you suddenly stop? At what moment do you actually decide enough is enough? And Haig quite rightly looks to his politicians, who give him no guidance. They simply say, we want you to win the war, carry on, you're our senior military commander, our advisor, we'll do what you want. And he's got no yardstick about what is too much, what is enough. So he's gone down as the architect of this huge, huge tragedy. There's no inevitability about that.
But wasn't this a military disaster by today's standards?
Of the 120,000 British soldiers who are attacking on the first day, 60,000 become casualties, of whom 20,000 are killed, most of those before breakfast. Now, if we think that the British Army today is under 100,000 strong, we're talking about almost the entire British Army becoming casualties, and a lot of the fatalities being suffered before breakfast has even finished.